No one could save the dying billionaire until a brave widow walked into his mansion. Everyone said he was beyond hope, cold, cruel, and counting down his final days alone. But when this widow was hired as his last caretaker, something no one expected happened. With nothing but her faith and kindness, she faced the man the whole town hated, the same man who once destroyed her life. At first he mocked her prayers. Then one night, when his heart stopped, her hands brought him back from the edge of death. Now, trapped under the same roof, two broken souls are forced to face the past. Neither of them can escape. But when she discovers his darkest secret, that he's the reason her husband died, everything changes. Will she walk away, or forgive the man she swore she'd never forgive? Because sometimes, the only thing stronger than pain is grace. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The Atlantic waves crashed against the rocky shore, their rhythm steady and ancient beneath the misty morning sky. Inside the sprawling seaside mansion that loomed over the coastline, Marcus Holloway lay still in his hospital bed, the mechanical hum of medical equipment filling the silence of his private wing. The room, despite its luxurious furnishings, felt cold and empty, much like the life of the man who occupied it. Marcus stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows, his right side frozen and useless, a cruel reminder of how far the mighty had fallen. The stroke had come without warning, cutting down the 49-year-old billionaire in the middle of a board meeting. Now, instead of commanding armies of executives, he could barely feed himself. The door creaked open, and Margaret Holloway stepped in, her sensible shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. Her face, so similar to his own, carried both worry and determination. "Marcus," she said softly, "we need to talk about getting you proper care." He turned his head slightly, the most movement he could manage, and fixed her with a cold stare. "Come to gloat, dear sister." His words slurred slightly, but the bitterness cut through clear enough. "Nobody's gloating," Margaret replied, moving closer to his bedside. "The doctors say you have weeks, maybe less. You've driven away every nurse and caretaker. Please, let me help you." A harsh laugh escaped his throat. "Help me? Like everyone else wanted to help me. The vultures circling, waiting for me to die so they can pick at what's left of my fortune." His voice grew stronger with anger. "Everyone wants something, Margaret. What's your angle?" Margaret's shoulders slumped slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I want my brother to find peace before it's too late. That's all I've ever wanted." "Peace?" He spat the word like poison. "Save your sanctimonious garbage for someone who cares." The silence stretched between them, heavy with decades of hurt and misunderstanding. Outside, seagulls wheeled and cried, their voices carrying through the thick glass. "I'm hiring someone for the night shift," Margaret finally said. "You don't have to like it, but you do have to accept it. I won't let you die alone and angry." Marcus turned away, staring back out at the ocean. "Waste your money however you want. They won't last long. None of them do." Margaret left without another word, her footsteps fading down the hallway. Marcus listened to the emptiness, trying to ignore the fear that crept in with the shadows. Fear of death, of judgment, of the legacy of destruction he'd left in his wake. As day turned to dusk, the sky transformed into a canvas of deep purples and oranges. Sophia Carter walked up the winding driveway, her shoes crunching on the gravel as the wind tugged at her coat. The mansion loomed before her, its windows glowing like tired eyes in the growing darkness. She clutched her worn Bible closer to her chest, drawing comfort from its familiar presence. "Lord," she whispered, her breath visible in the cool evening air, "give me strength to serve with compassion. Help me be your hands and feet, even here." The wind whipped harder, carrying the salty scent of the ocean. Sophia paused, taking in the imposing structure before her. She'd heard the rumors about Marcus Halloway, the ruthless business tactics, the lives destroyed, the families left homeless. Her own loss felt fresh again, remembering how Levi had struggled after the corporate takeover that had stolen their future. But now, standing on the threshold of the dying man's domain, Sophia pushed those thoughts aside. Her calling wasn't to judge, but to care, to bring light into dark places. She straightened her shoulders and climbed the steps to the front door, each footfall echoing with purpose. The security system buzzed her in, and a housekeeper led her through the maze of hallways. Original paintings worth millions adorned the walls, their beauty lost in the sterile atmosphere. The private hospital wing stood in stark contrast to the mansion's grandeur. All white walls and medical equipment, the scent of antiseptic hanging heavy in the air. Margaret met her at the nurse's station, her face lined with worry, but her smile genuine. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Carter. I know this won't be an easy assignment." Sophia returned the smile, warm and steady. "Please, call me Sophia. And sometimes the hardest assignments are exactly where we're meant to be." "He's had a difficult day," Margaret warned, leading her toward Marcus's room. "Try not to take anything he says personally. The stroke, it's changed him. Or maybe it just stripped away his ability to hide who he's always been." Sophia nodded, her mind already shifting into professional mode, cataloguing what she'd need to know about his care. But beneath that, she continued her silent prayer, asking for the wisdom to see past the anger to the hurting soul beneath. They paused outside his door, and Margaret squeezed Sophia's arm gently. "God bless you for being willing to try." Sophia watched Margaret walk away, then turned to face the door. Beyond it lay not just a patient, but a man whose decisions had rippled out to touch countless lives, including her own. She took a deep breath, adjusted her nursing bag, and reached for the handle. "Lord," she whispered one final time, "help me remember that every soul is worth saving." The door opened silently, and Sophia Carter stepped into Marcus Halloway's room, ready to begin her first night with the dying billionaire who had no idea that their paths had crossed before, in ways that had changed both their lives forever. The next morning dawned crisp and clear over the Atlantic, sunlight glinting off the mansion's windows as Sophia wheeled her battered suitcase down the polished hallway. Mr. Llewellyn, the head butler, led her to what would be her new quarters, a modest room tucked away in the servants' wing upstairs. "It's not much," he said, his British accent clipped and formal, "but it should serve your needs adequately." The room was small but clean, with faded wallpaper and simple furnishings. A narrow bed, a wooden dresser, and a small desk beneath a window overlooking the gardens. After weeks of sleeping on her cousin's pull-out couch, it felt like luxury. Sophia unzipped her suitcase, carefully removing the few possessions she'd brought. Her nurse's uniforms, pressed and folded. A framed photo of Levi, his warm smile frozen in time. The memory of his death 2 years ago still felt raw. The way he'd collapsed after months of stress, fighting the corporate takeover that had cost them everything. The doctors called it stress-induced cardiac failure, but Sophia knew the truth. Her husband's heart had been broken long before it stopped beating. She placed the photo on the nightstand, touching it gently. The hospital bills from his final days still haunted her mailbox, forcing her to pick up extra shifts just to keep the collectors at bay. This job, difficult as it might be, was a lifeline she couldn't afford to lose. Mr. Llewellyn cleared his throat from the doorway. "I feel obligated to warn you, Mrs. Carter. Mr. Halloway has certain patterns. No nurse has lasted beyond a week. He seems to take particular pleasure in driving them away." Sophia turned to face him, noting the weariness in his stance. "Thank you for the warning, Mr. Llewellyn. But I'm not easily driven." "As you say." His expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Pity, perhaps. "Breakfast is served in the kitchen at 6:30. Your first shift with Mr. Halloway begins at 7 o'clock sharp." After he left, Sophia unpacked her Bible, placing it beside Levi's photo. The worn leather cover was soft under her fingers, its pages dog-eared from years of seeking comfort in its verses. She would need that strength in the days ahead. The kitchen was a vast space of gleaming stainless steel and marble countertops. Sophia sat alone at a small table in the corner, trying to make her simple sandwich last through her meal break. The mansion's chef had offered to make her something, but she'd politely declined, not wanting to be a burden. Through the kitchen's swinging doors, she could see into the adjacent sitting room where Marcus Halloway spent his days. He sat in a custom medical recliner, wrapped in an expensive blanket that did nothing to hide how illness had ravaged his once powerful frame. His face was grey, marked by bitterness that seemed to age him beyond his 49 years. Sophia gathered her courage and entered the sitting room, moving to adjust his blanket, which had slipped from his shoulders. As she worked, she found herself humming softly, an old hymn her grandmother used to sing, the melody as natural as breathing. "Stop that infernal noise!" Marcus snapped, his voice harsh despite its weakness. "I'm not one of your church charity cases." Sophia's hand stilled on the blanket, but she kept her voice gentle. "I'm sorry if the humming bothered you, Mr. Halloway. It's just a habit." "Habit?" He scoffed. "Like that Bible you carry around? Tell me, where was your God when my brain decided to short-circuit? When everything I built started crumbling around me?" "God hasn't left you, Mr. Halloway. Sometimes we just can't see his purpose in our pain." Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Purpose? Save your fairy tales for Sunday school. I've seen how the world really works. The strong survive, the weak get crushed. That's the only truth that matters." Sophia finished adjusting the blanket in silence, each sharp word reminding her of Levi's final months. How many others had this man wounded in his climb to power? How many families had he torn apart with his truth? Later that evening, while Marcus dozed in his recliner, Sophia found a quiet moment alone in the kitchen. The house was still except for the distant sound of waves and the hum of medical equipment. She leaned against the counter, closing her eyes. "Lord," she whispered, her voice barely disturbing the silence, "give me patience. Help me see past his anger to the hurt beneath. Help me remember why I'm here." The memory of Levi's gentle spirit washed over her, his dreams of opening a community health center, his dedication to helping others even when they could barely help themselves. She couldn't save him, but maybe she could honor his memory by showing kindness to the very man who had contributed to his death. Sophia straightened her uniform and checked her watch. Time to dispense Marcus's evening medications. She would endure his bitter words and cruel judgments, not just for the paycheck that would help chip away at her debts, but for something more important, the chance to prove that compassion could survive even in the hardest soil. As she prepared the medications, she could hear Marcus's labored breathing from the other room. Whatever he had been, whatever he had done, he was now just a man facing his mortality. And Sophia Carter had made a promise, both to her profession and her faith, to care for those in need, even when they didn't want to be cared for. The next 2 days passed like a slow, heavy tide. Sophia moved through the mansion's hushed corridors, her footsteps echoing against marble floors that had seen better days. The grandeur remained, but like its owner, the house seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. Marcus watched her with eyes that burned with defiance. When she approached with his morning medications, he turned his head away, jaw set in stubborn resistance. I don't need your pity pills." He growled, his good hand clenching the armrest of his recliner. Sophia arranged the pills carefully on the silver tray beside him. "This isn't about pity, Mr. Holloway. These medications help manage your blood pressure and prevent another stroke. Maybe I want another stroke." His words came out sharp, meant to wound. Maybe I'm tired of being a specimen for people to gawk at and pretend to care about. "You're not a specimen. You're a patient who needs care." Sophia's voice remained steady, professional. "And I'm here to help you live, not watch you die." Marcus's laugh was hollow. "Live? Look at me. Half my body doesn't work. My empire's falling apart. What exactly am I living for?" "That's not for me to answer," Sophia replied, checking his vital signs with practiced efficiency. "But as long as you're breathing, there's purpose to be found." The afternoon light filtered through heavy curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Sophia had just finished recording his vital signs when she heard the distinct sound of glass shattering against the door. Water trickled beneath the frame, forming a growing puddle on the expensive hardwood. She turned slowly, meeting Marcus's challenging stare. His hand was still raised from throwing the glass, trembling slightly from the effort. He waited, clearly expecting, perhaps hoping for, an outburst of anger or resignation. Instead, Sophia retrieved a broom and dustpan from the nearby utility closet. She began gathering the broken pieces, her movements deliberate and calm. As she worked, a soft melody rose from her lips, an old spiritual her grandmother had taught her about finding strength in valleys low. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. The words floated through the room like a gentle breeze, neither confrontational nor retreat, simply present. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "You're wasting your time with those songs." "Music helps me focus," Sophia answered, carefully collecting the smaller shards. "My grandmother always said a singing heart makes light work." "Your grandmother sounds like a fool." "She raised 6 children alone after my grandfather died in the steel mill." Sophia continued, mopping the floor, her voice matter-of-fact. "Worked 3 jobs, never missed a church service, and still found reason to sing. I wouldn't call that foolish." The silence that followed felt heavier than before. As evening approached, dark clouds gathered over the Atlantic, bringing with them the first rumbles of an approaching storm. The wind picked up, rattling the windows of the mansion like impatient fingers. Sophia made her final rounds, checking Marcus's evening vitals and adjusting his position for comfort through the night. Thunder crashed outside, and she noticed a slight flinch in his expression. "Would you like me to close the drapes completely?" "I'm not afraid of storms." He snapped, but his eyes darted to the window as lightning illuminated the sky. "Of course not," Sophia agreed, but she drew the curtains anyway, adjusting the room's lighting to a soft glow. "Try to rest, Mr. Holloway. I'll be downstairs if you need anything." In his room, Marcus lay awake, listening to the storm's fury. Each thunderclap seemed to echo the accusations in his mind. Faces of people he'd crushed in business deals, families displaced by his development projects, lives altered by his relentless pursuit of profit. He remembered the community health center project he'd blocked 5 years ago, buying up the property to build luxury condominiums instead. How many people had that decision hurt? The wind howled through the eaves, carrying with it the faint sound of Sophia's voice from below. She sat in the kitchen, her Bible open on the table before her, reading aloud from the Psalms. The words drifted up through the old ventilation system. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, he leadeth me beside the still waters." Marcus turned his head on the pillow, trying to shut out the gentle words that seemed to pierce through his carefully constructed walls. He couldn't believe, in a God who would let him end up like this. And yet, something in Sophia's quiet faith nagged at him, like a splinter he couldn't quite ignore. The storm raged on, but beneath its chaos, Sophia's voice continued steady and sure, reaching through the darkness to touch a soul that had forgotten how to feel anything but anger. Though he would never admit it, Marcus found himself listening, each word a reminder of a time before wealth and power had hardened his heart, when he too might have believed in something more than the cold comfort of success. In the kitchen below, Sophia turned another page, unaware that her simple act of devotion was creating ripples in waters long thought frozen. The Psalms spoke of mercy and redemption, of healing and hope, themes that seemed impossible in the face of Marcus's bitterness, yet somehow felt more real with each word she spoke into the storm-dark night. The grandfather clock in the hall struck midnight, its chimes mixing with the rumble of distant thunder. Sophia's voice continued, a steady light in the darkness, while upstairs, a man who claimed not to believe lay listening, his defenses weakening against the persistent gentleness of faith. The storm intensified as midnight gave way to the early morning hours. At 2 o'clock in the morning, a particularly violent bolt of lightning split the sky, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundation of the mansion. In that same instant, the lights flickered once, twice, and then plunged the entire house into darkness. Sophia, who had dozed off briefly in her chair downstairs, jerked awake at the sudden blackout. Years of nursing instinct took over as she immediately reached for the emergency flashlight she kept in her pocket. Her first thought was of Marcus's medical equipment, particularly his heart monitor and oxygen machine. "Dear Lord, please," she whispered, already moving swiftly through the darkened hallways. The beam of her flashlight bounced off the walls as she hurried up the grand staircase, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. As she approached Marcus's room, an eerie silence made her pulse quicken. The usual steady beeping of his heart monitor was absent. She pushed the door open, casting her flashlight beam into the darkness. "Mr. Holloway," she called out. The light revealed Marcus in his bed, his face contorted in pain, gasping for air like a fish out of water. The heart monitor's screen was black. The backup battery had failed, along with the power. In the beam of her flashlight, she could see his lips taking on a bluish tinge. Sophia dropped her flashlight onto the bed, letting it illuminate the room indirectly. Without hesitation, she lowered the head of Marcus's bed to a flat position and began chest compressions. Her training took over completely. The proper hand position, the rhythm, the force needed. 1, 2, 3, 4. She counted under her breath, maintaining the steady pace she'd learned years ago. Between sets of compressions, she tilted his head back and gave 2 rescue breaths. "Lord Jesus," she prayed aloud as she worked, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. "Please spare this man. It's not his time yet. There's still work for him to do here." Another set of compressions. "Please, Lord, please." The minutes stretched out like hours. Sweat beaded on Sophia's forehead as she continued CPR, her arms beginning to ache from the effort. Still, she didn't stop. Her prayers became more urgent, mixing with her counting. "Come on, Mr. Holloway," she urged between breaths. "Fight, you're stronger than this." Just when her arms felt they couldn't continue any longer, Marcus's body suddenly jerked. A raspy, painful-sounding gasp escaped his lips, followed by a fit of coughing. Sophia quickly turned him onto his side, supporting his head as he struggled to regulate his breathing. When his coughing subsided, Marcus's eyes fluttered open. In the dim light from the flashlight, they looked different somehow. Vulnerable, almost childlike in their confusion. His gaze found Sophia's face, and his lips moved, forming words that came out as barely more than a whisper. "Why—" He struggled to speak, his voice rough and weak. "Why didn't you let me die?" Sophia's hand remained on his shoulder, steady and warm. Her response came without hesitation, soft but firm. Because God didn't. Marcus turned his head away from her, but not before she caught the shimmer of moisture in his eyes. The silence that followed was different from their previous ones, no longer charged with hostility, but heavy with something else. Questions, perhaps, or possibility. They remained that way until the backup generator finally kicked in, flooding the room with light and bringing the medical equipment back to life. The heart monitor resumed its steady beeping, each sound a reminder of the miracle that had just occurred. As dawn approached, the storm gradually moved out to sea, leaving behind a clean-washed sky and the first hints of sunrise. The mansion began to stir as the day staff arrived, and word of what had happened during the night spread quickly through whispered conversations and meaningful looks. Mr. Llewellyn, the head butler, personally brought Sophia a cup of strong tea, his usually stoic expression softened with concern. "You should rest, Miss Carter," he said quietly. "It's been quite a night." But Sophia shook her head. "I need to check on Mr. Halloway first. He'll be wanting his breakfast soon." To her surprise, Mr. Llewellyn's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "He's already asked for you," he said. "Said he wants you to read to him while he eats." Sophia blinked, certain she had misheard. "He wants me to read to him?" His exact words were, "Tell Ms. Carter to bring her Bible when she comes." Mr. Llewellyn confirmed. "First time I've heard him make a request instead of a demand in a very long time." When Sophia entered Marcus's room 30 minutes later, carrying her well-worn Bible along with his breakfast tray, she found him sitting up in bed. He looked pale and tired, but his eyes were alert. The usual sneer was absent from his face. "Good morning, Mr. Halloway," she said, setting down the tray. "How are you feeling?" He didn't answer directly, instead gesturing to the chair beside his bed. "You read Psalms last night?" he said. His voice was still weak, but the usual bite was missing. I'd like to hear more." Sophia settled into the chair, opening her Bible to where she had left off the night before. As she began to read, she noticed something extraordinary. Marcus was listening. Really listening. There were no scoffs, no cutting remarks, no dismissive gestures. His eyes remained fixed on the window, where the rising sun was painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, but she could tell by his expression that he was absorbing every word. The morning light grew stronger, casting long shadows across the room as Sophia's voice filled the space between them with ancient words of hope and redemption. Outside, birds began their morning songs, joining her voice in what felt like a hymn of thanksgiving. Marcus ate his breakfast slowly, methodically, never once interrupting her reading. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. The years of bitterness and anger wouldn't disappear in a single night. But something had shifted, like the first crack in a frozen lake at the beginning of spring. In the quiet of that morning, as Sophia's voice carried the timeless words through the sun-filled room, a small seed of change took root in soil that had long been barren. The days following Marcus's near-death experience settled into a gentle rhythm. Morning light would filter through the ocean-facing windows, casting warm patterns across the hardwood floors as Sophia went about her duties. The mansion's atmosphere had shifted, the heavy cloud of bitterness that once permeated every room gradually lifting like morning fog. Sophia maintained her routines with quiet determination. Each morning, she would prepare Marcus's breakfast tray, carefully arranging his medications beside his juice glass. His hand still trembled when he reached for things, but she noticed he was trying harder to feed himself, even when frustrated by his limitations. "You're getting stronger," she observed one morning, watching him successfully manage his spoon without spilling. Marcus's response was a slight upturn of his lips, Not quite a full smile, but worlds away from his previous scowls. Thanks to your stubbornness, I suppose. The scripture readings continued, becoming a cornerstone of their daily routine. Sophia would settle into what had become her chair, its cushions now molded to her shape, and open her Bible to where they'd left off. Sometimes Marcus would close his eyes as she read, but she knew he was listening by the way his expression would change with certain verses. One particularly sunny afternoon, Sophia hummed quietly while dusting the massive bookshelf that dominated one wall of Marcus's study. The melody, an old hymn her grandmother had taught her, filled the comfortable silence between them. To her surprise, Marcus didn't object to her singing anymore. If anything, he seemed to relax when she did. "That's pleasant," he commented unexpectedly, his voice carrying an unfamiliar softness. "The song." Sophia paused, touched by this small acknowledgement. "Thank you, Mr. Holloway. My grandmother used to sing it while she worked." Moving methodically along the shelves, Sophia's attention was caught by a gleam of brass. Among the leather-bound volumes and corporate awards sat a simple frame, its glass slightly dusty. She lifted it carefully, intending to clean it, but the image within made her blood run cold. The newspaper article was yellowed with age, but the headline remained clear: "Holloway Corp breaks ground on Haven Oaks redevelopment." The photo showed a younger Marcus, looking triumphant as he cut a red ribbon, surrounded by suits and forced smiles. The date stamped at the bottom of the article matched perfectly with the beginning of her personal nightmare. Sophia's hands began to tremble so violently she had to set the frame down. Haven Oaks, her neighborhood, her community, her home, the place where she and Levi had planned to raise their family. The same development that had been foreclosed upon under suspicious circumstances, forcing dozens of families into financial ruin, her own included. The memories crashed over her like a tidal wave, Levi's increasing anxiety as they fought the foreclosure notices, the stress that had weakened his heart, the final heart attack that took him from her. All of it traced back to this man, this project, this moment captured in time. Something wrong? Marcus's voice cut through her thoughts. Sophia turned slowly, the frame still in her hands. "Haven Oaks," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This was your project." Marcus squinted at the photo, recognition dawning on his face. "Ah, yes, one of our more profitable ventures. Bought the land cheap, rezoned it, cleared out the existing properties." He spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "Just business." "Just business?" Sophia's voice cracked. "Those were people's homes, families, lives." She took a deep breath, struggling to maintain her composure. "My home, my husband." Marcus's expression shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension. "You lived there?" "My husband Levi died 2 years ago," Sophia said, each word heavy with suppressed emotion. The stress of fighting your false foreclosure claims triggered his heart condition. He was 34 years old. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's face had gone pale, his eyes wide with shock. I didn't know." "No," Sophia agreed quietly. "You never knew any of us. We were just numbers on a spreadsheet, weren't we?" She set the frame down with trembling hands and walked out of the room, her steps echoing in the sudden stillness. Upstairs, in her modest quarters, she pulled out her suitcase and began methodically folding her clothes. Tears fell silently onto her uniforms as she packed, her movements automatic. Dawn was just breaking when Sophia finished packing. She stood in her room, suitcase ready, staring at her reflection in the window. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, but she barely noticed its beauty. A crash from down the hall interrupted her thoughts, followed by a weak cry. "Sophia!" Her body moved before her mind could process the decision. She found Marcus collapsed in the hallway outside his room, his legs having given out beneath him. His face was ashen, his breathing labored. "I'm here," she said automatically, rushing to his side. With practiced care, she helped him up, supporting his weight as they made their way back to his bed. His hand clutched at her arm, desperate and shaking. "Don't," he gasped. "Don't go." Sophia felt tears welling up again as she settled him, back against his pillows. "I don't know why I'm still here," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But maybe God does." Marcus's hand found hers, gripping it weakly. The touch was like a question, a plea, and perhaps the beginning of an apology. Sophia didn't pull away, even as her tears fell freely now. They stayed that way as the sun continued its ascent, casting long shadows across the floor. Two broken people connected by a thread of grace neither fully understood. The morning light strengthened, filling the room with warmth, but the real illumination was happening in the spaces between them. In the understanding dawning in Marcus's eyes, in the trembling of Sophia's hands as she adjusted his blankets, in the weight of truth finally spoken aloud. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mansion's polished floors as Sophia made her way through her routine. Her packed suitcase remained upstairs, untouched since dawn. Each step felt heavy with purpose, not the burden of obligation, but the weight of conviction that kept her feet moving forward. In the kitchen, Mrs. Reynolds, the cook, gave her a concerned look. "Dear, we heard about Haven Oaks. No one would blame you if—" "I know," Sophia interrupted gently, arranging Marcus's breakfast tray. "But I'm staying." The elderly cook squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than most, child." Sophia carried the tray upward, pausing outside Marcus's door. Through the gap she could hear him muttering. No, praying. His voice was rough with disuse and emotion. "I don't deserve, after everything I've done." His words faded into silence. Sophia's heart tightened. She'd spent most of the night in the mansion's small chapel, pouring out her own prayers. She hadn't known he could hear her through the old heating vents. She knocked softly and entered. Marcus looked different somehow, diminished, but not in the way his illness had diminished him. There was a new humility in his eyes when he met her gaze. "Good morning," she said quietly, setting down the tray. "Sophia, he began, then stopped. Would you help me to the veranda today? I haven't seen the ocean in weeks." It took time and patience to help him into the wheelchair. His body was weak, but his determination was strong. Together, they navigated through the wide hallways until they reached the glass doors leading to the wraparound veranda. The salt air rushed to meet them, carrying the distant cry of seabirds. Sophia positioned his wheelchair near the railing, where the view of the Atlantic stretched endlessly before them. The morning light painted the waves in shades of silver and blue. They sat in silence for a long while, letting the ocean's rhythm wash over them. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice barely audible above the surf. "I keep thinking about my mother," he said. "She used to tell me that money wasn't worth losing your soul over." He gave a bitter laugh. "I should have listened." Sophia settled into a nearby chair, her hands folded in her lap. "Tell me about her." "She was like you in some ways. Strong faith, gentle spirit." Marcus's eyes grew distant. "When she died, I was already becoming what I became. Too busy with deals to visit her much in the hospital. The day she passed, I was closing a merger." His voice cracked. "I stopped praying after that, stopped believing in anything except power and profit. Loss changes us," Sophia said softly. "When Levi died, I was so angry at God. But then I realized God was the only one who truly understood my pain." Marcus turned to look at her, his face etched with regret. "How do you do it? How do you sit here with me, knowing what I did to your family? To so many families?" Sophia took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Because holding on to bitterness only hurts ourselves, and because I believe in grace, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." They watched a flock of pelicans glide past, their wings catching the morning light. "I've never apologized to anyone," Marcus admitted. "I wouldn't even know where to begin." "You begin by listening," Sophia said. "Really listening to the stories of the people you've hurt, to your own heart, to God." The morning wore on, the sun climbing higher. They talked about loss, his mother, her Levi, about the weight of regret and the possibility of redemption. For once, Marcus didn't try to defend himself or justify his actions. He simply listened, letting Sophia's words sink into the spaces where his armor had begun to crack. After lunch, she helped him back to his room. As she turned to leave, he caught her hand. "Sophia, I haven't prayed since my mother died. I wouldn't know how anymore." She turned back, her eyes gentle. "It's never too late to speak again," she said softly. "God's still listening." That evening, after dinner had been cleared away, Sophia sat in her usual spot by Marcus's window. The moon had risen, casting a silvery path across the dark water. Behind her, she heard Marcus's voice, barely a whisper. "God, if you're there, I don't deserve to be heard, but—" His words faltered, then continued. "Please help me make things right." Sophia kept her eyes on the shimmering waves, giving him privacy in this moment of vulnerability. Neither of them fully recognized the change taking root in their hearts, like seeds planted in soil that had long been barren but was finally beginning to soften under the gentle rain of grace. The ocean continued its eternal rhythm, waves breaking against the shore like time itself, washing away the old and making way for the new. In the quiet of the room, two broken people sat in the presence of something larger than their pain, something that felt remarkably like hope. Mrs. Reynolds found them like that an hour later. Marcus dozing in his chair, Sophia humming softly as she read her Bible by moonlight. The old cook shook her head in wonder, remembering the bitter man who had raged against the world just days before. Sometimes, she reflected, the greatest miracles were the quiet ones that happened in human hearts. The morning sun filtered through the mansion's tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Sophia watched with quiet pride as Marcus gripped his walker, determination etched on his face. His steps were shaky but purposeful as he made his way down the hallway. Slow and steady. She encouraged, staying close, but letting him work through it himself. Marcus nodded, sweat beading on his forehead. 2 weeks ago I couldn't even stand, he said between breaths. Now look at me, practically running marathons. A faint smile played at the corners of his mouth. Mrs. Reynolds appeared in the doorway, her eyes widening. "Mr. Halloway, you're up and about." She hurried to fetch a glass of water. "Thank you, Helen," Marcus said, using her first name for the first time in years. The old cook nearly dropped the glass in surprise. Later that morning, Sophia helped Marcus with breakfast. His hands trembled less now as he handled the spoon, managing most bites without assistance. These small victories felt monumental after weeks of total dependence. The Atlantic Daily called again, Mrs. Reynolds mentioned as she cleared away the dishes. "They're quite persistent about getting that interview." Marcus's face clouded. "What do they want?" "They're calling it the Billionaire's Miracle," Sophia explained gently. "Word's gotten around about your recovery." "And about you," Marcus added, studying her face. "The nurse who wouldn't give up." Sophia shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not comfortable with attention," Besides, she hesitated. The town hasn't forgotten Haven Oaks. Your name still brings up painful memories for many people. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Maybe it's time I faced that, he said finally. Not through some newspaper story, but... He looked up at her. Would you take me to your church on Sunday? Sophia's surprise must have shown on her face because he quickly added, if you think they'd allow it. Of course they would, she said softly. Everyone's welcome in God's house. The rest of the week passed in a blur of physical therapy and preparation. By Sunday morning, Sophia's stomach was in knots as she helped Marcus dress in a simple grey suit. The drive to the small chapel was silent, both lost in their thoughts. The white wooden church stood modest but dignified against the morning sky, its steeple reaching toward heaven like a finger pointing the way home. Sophia helped Marcus from the car, steadying his walker on the gravel path. As they approached the entrance, conversations died away. Faces turned, expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to barely concealed anger. Sophia felt Marcus tense beside her. Maybe this was a mistake, he whispered. No, she said firmly. This is exactly where you need to be. Pastor Green appeared in the doorway, his kind face showing no surprise at the unexpected visitor. He made his way down the steps, extending his hand. Welcome to our church, Mr. Halloway, he said warmly. We're glad to have you join us this morning. Marcus couldn't meet his eyes. I don't deserve to be here, he whispered, his voice thick with shame. Sophia's hand found his shoulder, squeezing gently. The simple gesture spoke volumes of forgiveness, of support, of grace freely given. Pastor Green's eyes crinkled with understanding as he nodded. Come on in, he said. Service is about to start. They made their way slowly to a pew near the back. Sophia could feel the stares, hear the whispers. She recognized faces from Haven Oaks, Mrs. Thompson, who'd lost her family home of 30 years, the Martinez family, who'd had to move their children to a different school district, old Mr. Jenkins, who still carried the foreclosure notice in his wallet as a bitter reminder. The organ began to play, its familiar hymn filling the sacred space. Pastor Green took his place at the pulpit, his deep voice carrying to every corner of the sanctuary. Today's sermon, he began, is about grace. His eyes swept the congregation, settling briefly on Marcus. Not the kind of grace that's earned through good works or right living, but the kind that's given freely, even, perhaps especially, to those who feel they deserve it least. Marcus's shoulders began to shake. Sophia reached for his hand, holding it as tears rolled silently down his cheeks. The pastor's words washed over them like healing rain. Grace is not a transaction, Pastor Green continued. It's not a reward for good behavior or a prize for perfect attendance. Grace is a gift, freely given by a God who loves us not for who we should be, but for who we are, broken, flawed, and desperately in need of mercy. Throughout the service, Sophia felt the atmosphere in the church slowly shift. The initial tension began to dissolve as the congregation witnessed Marcus's genuine brokenness. When they stood to sing Amazing Grace, his voice joined theirs, trembling and uncertain at first, then growing stronger. After the final prayer, Pastor Green made his way to their pew. Thank you for coming, he said, clasping Marcus's hand between both of his own. I hope we'll see you again. As they made their way back to the car, several church members approached. Mrs. Thompson stepped forward, her lined face a study in conflicting emotions. Mr. Halloway, she said quietly, I lost everything when Haven Oaks was foreclosed. Marcus met her eyes, his own still red from crying. I know, he replied. I'm so sorry. I can't undo what I did, but I want to try to make it right. She nodded slowly. "Well," she said after a moment, "Pastor Green always says the first step is showing up. You showed up today." The drive back to the mansion was quiet, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Sophia glanced at Marcus, noting how his expression had softened, as if some great weight had begun to lift. "Thank you," he said finally, "for bringing me today. For," he gestured vaguely, searching for words, "for everything." Sophia smiled, remembering Pastor Green's words about grace. Sometimes it came in grand gestures and dramatic moments, but more often it came in small acts of kindness, in gentle words, in showing up when it would be easier to stay away. As they pulled through the mansion gates, the morning sun caught the ocean waves, making them sparkle like diamonds. Marcus watched them for a long moment before speaking. "I'd like to come back next Sunday," he said quietly, "if that's all right." Sophia nodded, her heart full. "Of course it's all right." The mansion stood silent and grand against the sky, but somehow it felt less imposing now, less like a fortress and more like a place where healing could happen, where grace, given, not earned, could work its quiet miracle in human hearts. The Wednesday afternoon sun cast long shadows through the mansion's windows as Marcus wheeled himself onto the veranda. His hands trembled slightly on the armrests, but not from physical weakness this time. Sophia noticed his agitation as she arranged his afternoon medications. "Could you sit with me for a while?" His voice was quiet, uncertain. "There are things I need to tell you, things you deserve to know." Sophia settled into the chair beside him, her heart beating a little faster. She'd seen this coming in his eyes all week, in the way he'd grown more withdrawn after church. "I need to tell you everything," Marcus began, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon where sea met sky. "About who I was, what I did, not just to Haven Oaks, but everywhere." The ocean breeze carried the salt air around them as Marcus began his confession. He spoke of his early days in real estate, of small successes that grew into an obsession with more properties, more profits, more power. "I stopped seeing people," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "They became numbers on spreadsheets, obstacles to progress. When reports came in about families struggling, about communities being torn apart." He paused, swallowing hard. "I ignored them all." Sophia's hands clenched in her lap, but she remained silent, letting him continue. "Haven Oaks wasn't the first community I destroyed, but it was the one I'm most ashamed of." Marcus admitted. "My team found technicalities in the deeds, old zoning violations we could exploit. We knew people had lived there for generations. We knew they couldn't afford to fight us in court." Sophia's breath caught as memories flooded back. The community meetings, the desperate fundraisers, the prayers for intervention that seemed to go unanswered. "There was a report," Marcus continued, his voice breaking, "about an elderly woman who'd lived in her house for 60 years. She begged us not to take it, said she'd rather die than leave. He covered his face with his hands. "I told my lawyers to proceed anyway." Sophia remembered that woman, Mrs. Evans, who'd taught Sunday school for 40 years. She'd passed away just weeks after the eviction, her heart finally giving out in a strange apartment across town. The development plans were already drawn up. Marcus went on. "Luxury condos, high-end retail. We estimated a 400% return on investment. That's all I cared about. The numbers. Not the children who'd have to change schools. Not the elderly who'd lose their support networks. Not the small business owners who'd lose everything." He turned to look at Sophia directly, his eyes red-rimmed. "Your husband. I never knew. Never wanted to know about the real people affected, but there were reports about the stress, the health impacts, I ignored those too. Sophia felt tears sliding down her cheeks, remembering Levi's final days, the strain of moving, the mounting bills, the heart attack that took him far too soon. The worst part, Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper, is that I convinced myself I was doing people a favor, revitalizing the neighborhood, improving property values, such pretty words to justify ugly actions. The confession poured out of him now, other communities destroyed, other lives ruined, bribes paid, officials corrupted, all in the name of profit. Sophia listened, her heart torn between the old hatred that had driven her for so long and the new understanding that was slowly taking its place. When Marcus finally fell silent, the sun had begun to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. "You can't undo the past," Sophia said at last, her voice gentle but firm. "But you can start building something that matters now." Marcus looked at her, hope and doubt warring in his expression. "How? After everything I've done?" "By using what you have to help heal what was broken," she answered. "Not to ease your guilt, but because it's right." Something shifted in Marcus's face, a decision being made, a path being chosen. "Get me my phone," he said suddenly. "I need to call James." Sophia brought him the phone, watching as he dialed his lawyer's number with shaking fingers. "James, yes, I know what time it is. I need you to start working on something immediately." Marcus's voice grew stronger as he spoke. "A new trust. I want to dedicate substantial resources to rebuilding the Haven Oaks community. Not just houses, we're talking about a complete restoration. Community center, health clinic, small business grants." He listened for a moment, then shook his head. "No, this isn't about tax benefits. This is about making things right. I want this done properly, with community input at every stage. And James, this takes priority over everything else." After ending the call, Marcus sat back in his wheelchair, looking both exhausted and somehow lighter. Sophia went to prepare his evening tea, her mind processing everything she'd heard. Standing in the kitchen, she glanced through the doorway at Marcus. He sat quietly watching the last rays of sunlight fade over the ocean, his profile softened by the golden light. For the first time, she realized she no longer saw the cruel billionaire who had destroyed her community. Instead, she saw something else, a man humbled by his own mistakes, trying to find his way toward redemption. The tea kettle whistled, pulling her from her thoughts. As she prepared the cup the way he liked it, 1 sugar, a splash of milk, Sophia found herself humming softly. The melody was an old hymn about grace and second chances, its quiet notes floating through the kitchen like a prayer. The morning sun cast long shadows across Marcus's bedroom as Sophia helped him button his dress shirt. His fingers trembled too much to manage the small buttons himself, but his determination showed in the set of his jaw. "You don't have to do this today," Sophia said gently, smoothing his collar. "The doctors said you need rest." Marcus shook his head. "I've rested long enough. These people have waited too long for the truth." He glanced at his reflection in the mirror, noting how his stroke had left one side of his face slightly drooping. "Though I doubt they'll want to hear anything I have to say." The town hall of Haven Oaks stood at the center of what had once been a thriving community. Now its white paint was peeling, and the steps were cracked, visible symbols of the neighborhood's decline. As Marcus's driver helped him from the car, Sophia could feel the hostility radiating from the gathering crowd. "That's him," someone whispered loudly. "The man who destroyed everything. Got some nerve showing his face here." Another voice added. Sophia took Marcus's arm, steadying him as he gripped his walker. Each step up to the entrance seemed to take an eternity, but he refused to use the wheelchair. "I need to stand before them." He'd insisted. They deserve that much respect. Inside, the meeting room was packed. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of what seemed like the entire neighborhood. Old faces Sophia recognized from church sat alongside younger families who'd lost their homes. The air felt thick with tension and unspoken accusations. Mayor Thompson, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, called the meeting to order. "Mr. Holloway has requested time to address the community," she announced, her tone carefully neutral. "We will hear him out." Marcus made his way slowly to the podium, his walker scraping against the worn floorboards. Sophia stood close behind him, ready to catch him if his strength failed. The silence in the room was deafening. "My name is Marcus Holloway," he began, his voice wavering slightly. "Though I suspect none of you need that introduction. You know me as the man who took your homes, your businesses, your community." A murmur of anger rippled through the crowd. Marcus gripped the podium tighter. "I'm not here to make excuses. What I did was wrong. I put profit above people. I convinced myself that progress meant destroying what you'd built together. I was wrong." His voice cracked. "So terribly wrong." "Tell that to my grandmother," someone shouted from the back. "She died broken-hearted after you took her house." "My kids had to change schools," another voice called out. "We lost everything." Marcus absorbed each accusation like physical blows, but he didn't flinch. "You're right, all of you. I can't undo the pain I've caused, but I can try to make amends." He gestured to his lawyer, who distributed packets to the town council members. "I'm establishing a trust of $50 million for the restoration of Haven Oaks. Not just rebuilding, but creating something better. A new community center, a health clinic, grants for small businesses to return." The room erupted in chaos. Some people jumped to their feet, shouting that it was too late, that money couldn't fix what he'd broken. Others whispered frantically, examining the proposal documents. "You think you can buy forgiveness?" Someone yelled. "This is just to ease your guilty conscience." Marcus swayed slightly, and Sophia stepped forward, gripping his arm. But instead of retreating, she turned to face the crowd. "I understand your anger," she said, her clear voice cutting through the noise. "My husband Levi died because of what happened here. I know the cost better than most." She took a deep breath. "But he's trying to make things right. That deserves a chance." The room fell silent, stunned by her words. They all knew Sophia, remembered her husband. Her presence beside Marcus carried weight they couldn't ignore. "This isn't about forgiveness," Marcus added quietly. "That's not something I can ask for. This is about doing what's right, even if it's years too late. The trust will be community-controlled. You'll decide how to rebuild. I'm just providing the resources you should have had all along." Mayor Thompson studied the documents carefully. "This appears to be legally binding. The funds would be released immediately." Gradually, the mood in the room began to shift. Not to acceptance, exactly, but to cautious consideration. People began asking practical questions about the trust, the timeline, the decision-making process. By the time they left, 2 hours later, Marcus was exhausted but upright. As they walked to the car, a reporter from the local paper approached them. "Mr. Holloway, Ms. Carter, any comment about today's announcement?" Sophia started to wave them away, but Marcus spoke up. "Just say that it's time for healing to begin. The rest is up to the community." 3 days later, the Haven Oaks Herald ran the headline, "Billionaire seeks redemption. Widow stands by him." The article detailed the trust announcement, but focused equally on the unlikely alliance between Marcus and Sophia. That evening, they shared a quiet dinner on the mansion's veranda. The ocean breeze carried the salt smell that Sophia had come to associate with their conversations, and for the first time, she heard Marcus laugh, a genuine sound, rusty from disuse, but real. The look on Thompson's face when she saw the number. He chuckled. I thought her eyes would pop out. Sophia smiled, cutting into her grilled chicken. I think you shocked everyone today, including me. Good shocked or bad shocked? Good, she said softly. Definitely good. Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching the waves roll in. You know, I haven't felt this alive in years, even with everything, the stroke, the therapy, the uncertainty. I feel more present than I have in decades. Sophia set down her fork, studying him. The harsh lines around his mouth had softened, and there was a light in his eyes she'd never seen before. That's because you're finally living, she said. Really living, not just existing. They shared a look of understanding, both knowing how far they'd come from that first night when she'd walked up his driveway, Bible in hand, praying for strength. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like one worth walking. The peaceful evening shattered with the sound of expensive tires crunching on gravel. Sophia looked up from where she was adjusting Marcus's medication schedule, her heart sinking at the sight of 2 luxury cars speeding up the mansion's circular drive. Who could that be at this hour? Marcus wondered, setting aside the book they'd been discussing. Before Sophia could respond, the grand entrance doors burst open. Gregory Halloway strode in, his tailored suit as sharp as his expression, followed by his mother Lydia, whose high heels clicked ominously against the marble floor. Father, what in God's name do you think you're doing? Gregory's voice echoed through the foyer. $50 million to rebuild some worthless neighborhood? Marcus straightened in his wheelchair, his jaw tightening. Gregory, Lydia, to what do I owe this pleasure? Lydia's perfectly painted lips curled into a sneer as she surveyed the room, her gaze landing on Sophia with obvious disdain. Really, Marcus, first you give away our family's fortune, and now you're letting the help make your medical decisions? Sophia stood quietly, maintaining her dignity despite the hostility radiating from both visitors. She'd dealt with prejudice before, but this felt different, more personal, more calculated. Sophia is not the help, Marcus said firmly. She's the reason I'm alive, and what I do with my money is none of your concern. Gregory laughed, but there was no humor in it. None of our concern. That's our inheritance you're throwing away on your little charity project. Your inheritance? Marcus's voice grew stronger, anger giving him energy. That money was earned through destroying lives. I'm trying to make it right. Make it right? Lydia stepped forward, her designer perfume overwhelming in the small space. Or are you being manipulated by this woman? She gestured dismissively at Sophia. We've done our research on her, Marcus. Her husband died because of Haven Oaks. How convenient that she's now controlling your decisions about rebuilding it. Sophia felt her hands trembling, but kept her voice steady. I'm not controlling anything. Mr. Halloway makes his own choices. Father. Gregory moved closer, his tone switching to false concern. You had a stroke. You're vulnerable. Clearly this woman has taken advantage. Enough! Marcus's shout surprised everyone, even himself. Sophia has shown me more genuine care in these past weeks than either of you have in years. Every penny I'm donating is mine to give. Now get out of my house. Lydia's face hardened. I was afraid you'd be difficult about this. She snapped her fingers, and 3 men in expensive suits entered, carrying briefcases. These are the corporate lawyers from the board. We've been monitoring your erratic behavior. What is this? Marcus demanded, though fear had begun creeping into his voice. The lead lawyer stepped forward, opening his briefcase. Mr. Halloway, We have papers here declaring you mentally unfit to make financial decisions. Given your medical condition and recent, unusual choices, the board has voted to place you under supervised care." "You can't do this," Sophia protested, moving to stand between them and Marcus. "He's of sound mind. Ask his doctors." "We have." Gregory smiled coldly. "And they agree that stroke victims often experience personality changes that can impact their judgment. The papers are already filed." 2 paramedics entered with a gurney, and Sophia's heart dropped. This had been planned, coordinated. They'd never had a chance. "Marcus will be moved to his city penthouse," Lydia announced with artificial sweetness, "where he can receive proper medical supervision, away from certain influences." Her eyes cut to Sophia. "No." Marcus grabbed Sophia's hand. "I won't go. This is my home, my choice." But the lawyers were already moving, presenting documents that required immediate action. The paramedics approached with professional detachment, ready to transfer Marcus to the gurney. "Sophia." Marcus's voice cracked as they began to move him. "Don't stop believing. If I can't finish this, you must." She tried to follow, but Gregory stepped in her path. "Your services are no longer required. You'll receive your final payment in the mail." Sophia could only watch helplessly as they wheeled Marcus out. His eyes stayed locked on hers until the massive doors swung shut between them. Through the windows, she saw the ambulance's lights flash to life, carrying away the man who had become so much more than just her patient. The mansion felt cavernous and cold after everyone left. Sophia remained rooted in place, tears finally falling freely down her cheeks. The sound of waves crashed against the shore outside, a rhythm that had become so familiar during their evening talks. When morning came, Sophia found herself in the mansion's small chapel, where she and Marcus had often prayed together. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting colored shadows across the empty pews. She knelt, clutching her Bible close to her heart. "Lord," she whispered, her voice rough from a sleepless night, "give me strength. Show me the way forward." She thought of Marcus's last words to her, feeling their weight settle into her soul. "If I can't finish this, you must." The morning light grew stronger, warming her face as she prayed. The chapel's silence held no answers, but Sophia felt her resolve strengthening. This wasn't over. Sometimes faith meant fighting back, and she had never been one to give up easily. She remained there, letting memories of the past weeks flow through her mind. Marcus's first genuine smile, his trembling voice during his first prayer, the light in his eyes when he announced the Haven Oaks Trust. God had brought them together for a purpose, and she refused to believe that purpose ended here. The sound of the mansion staff beginning their morning routines drifted through the chapel doors, but Sophia stayed kneeling, drawing strength from the quiet sanctuary. Marcus's words echoed in her heart. "Don't stop believing, Sophia." And she wouldn't. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same grace and determination that had carried her through every other storm in her life. Above her, morning light continued to pour through the stained glass, painting the chapel in colors of hope and possibility, even as uncertainty loomed like a shadow at the edges of her vision. The weeks after Marcus's forced departure stretched like shadows at sunset, each day longer than the last. Sophia threw herself into her work at the Ocean View Medical Clinic, trying to fill the void left by his absence. Her small office, with its mint green walls and single window, became both sanctuary and prison, a place to heal others while her own heart ached. "Any news about Mr. Halloway?" she would ask whenever Margaret called, but the answers grew increasingly grim. "They've got him isolated," Margaret would say, her voice tight with worry. "Gregory and Lydia control everything now. Even I can barely see him." October slipped into November, bringing slate-grey skies and bitter winds off the Atlantic. The morning news whispered about Marcus's declining health, each report more concerning than the last. Sophia kept his photograph from the newspaper on her desk, his smile, so rare and hard-won, frozen in time. One particularly dreary Tuesday afternoon, rain drummed against Sophia's office window as she finished updating patient charts. Thunder rolled in the distance, reminding her of that stormy night when she'd saved Marcus's life. The memory of his first genuine thank you still warmed her heart. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. "Ms. Carter?" The clinic receptionist stood there, holding a thick cream-colored envelope. "This just arrived by courier. It's marked urgent." Sophia's heart skipped when she saw the seal. Blackwood and Associates, Marcus's personal lawyers. Her hands trembled as she opened it, the heavy paper crisp beneath her fingers. Inside, she found a letter written in Marcus's distinctive scrawl, the lines slightly uneven from his weakened right hand. The date at the top was just 3 days ago. "Dear Sophia, by the time you read this, I will likely have passed from this world. The doctors say days, maybe hours, but I'm not afraid anymore. You taught me that death isn't the end, just a change of address, as you once said. You came into my life when I was already dead inside, though my heart was still beating. You healed what the doctors couldn't. My heart? Not just the muscle and valves, but the hardened, bitter core of who I'd become. Your faith, your forgiveness, your unwavering kindness. They brought me back to life in ways no medicine could. I'm sorry they took me away before we could finish what we started. But God, in His wisdom, lent me life long enough to return what I stole, not just from you, but from so many others. Enclosed, you'll find documents for a trust I established in your name. It's modest by my old standards. Gregory and Lydia's lawyers made sure of that. But it's enough to build something beautiful, something that matters. Use it to rebuild your late husband's dream. The Levi Carter Community Health Center deserves to exist. I've included everything you need to make it happen, and Margaret will help with the details. It's not redemption. That came through grace I didn't deserve. Consider it instead a final gift from a man who learned to believe again. Thank you, Sophia, for showing me that it's never too late to change, for teaching me that faith isn't a weakness, but the greatest strength we have, for proving that forgiveness, even when unearned, can transform a life. Keep building, Sophia. Keep believing. Keep shining your light into dark places. With eternal gratitude, Marcus Halloway. The letter slipped from Sophia's fingers as she sank to her knees, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. Rain continued to fall outside, but she barely heard it over the sound of her own heart beating. "Lord," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "thank you. Thank you for allowing me to see your work in him. Thank you for this gift." She remained there, kneeling on the office floor, letting waves of gratitude wash over her. The trust documents lay scattered around her, blueprints for a future she and Levi had once dreamed of together, now made possible by the most unlikely of angels. Through her tears, Sophia smiled, remembering Marcus's words from their last evening together. Sometimes God's greatest miracles don't look like miracles at all. Sometimes they look like second chances. She gathered the papers carefully, holding them close to her heart. Outside her window, the rain began to ease, and a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds. It illuminated her desk, falling across Marcus's photograph, making his smile seem to shine even brighter. Sophia touched the image gently. "Rest in peace, Marcus," she whispered. "Your story isn't finished, it's just beginning." The trust papers felt warm in her hands, like they carried not just legal weight, but spiritual significance. This wasn't just money or property, It was a legacy of transformation, a testament to the power of faith and forgiveness to change hearts and heal wounds. She placed everything carefully in her bag, wiped her eyes, and stood up straight. There would be time for more tears later, but right now she had work to do. A community to heal. A dream to build. Just as she reached for her coat, Sophia paused, remembering something Marcus had said during one of their last conversations on the veranda. The greatest act of faith isn't believing in God's power, it's believing in His timing. Now she understood. All the pain, all the loss, all the struggles, they had led to this moment. God's timing, perfect as always, had brought healing not just to Marcus, but to her own heart as well. The rain outside had stopped completely now, and the late afternoon sun painted the world in shades of gold. Sophia gathered her things, holding the letter close to her heart one more time before carefully tucking it away. As she left the clinic that evening, her steps felt lighter than they had in weeks. The weight of uncertainty had been replaced by the warmth of purpose. Marcus's final gift wasn't just the trust, it was the reminder that God's love could transform even the hardest heart, and that forgiveness, freely given, could ripple out to touch countless lives. The sun was setting as Sophia drove home, casting long shadows across the coastal road. But for the first time since Marcus had been taken away, she felt nothing but peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight, new hearts to heal. But tonight she would rest in the knowledge that sometimes God's greatest miracles come wrapped in loss, and His greatest gifts are born from sacrifice. She whispered a final prayer of gratitude as she turned onto her street, the evening light gilding everything in sight. Thank you, Lord, for showing us both the way home. Sophia's determination burned bright as she stood before the vacant lot in Haven Oaks, clutching her worn leather portfolio. The morning sun cast long shadows across the weed-filled expanse where hope would soon take root. She touched the small silver cross at her neck, a habit that brought comfort in moments of uncertainty. Lord, guide my steps, she whispered, opening her portfolio to reveal meticulously organized permit applications and building plans. The city planning office buzzed with fluorescent lights and whispered conversations. Mr. Thompson, the chief planning officer, peered at Sophia over his reading glasses. His skepticism was evident in the tight line of his mouth. Ms. Carter, while the funding is in place, you understand this is a complex undertaking, he said, shuffling through the papers. The Holloway name carries certain associations in this town. Sophia straightened her spine. Which is exactly why this matters so much. This center isn't about Marcus Holloway's name. It's about healing our community, the same community my husband dreamed of serving. Later that afternoon, Sophia sat in her small home office, carefully recording the day's events in her journal. The blue leather cover bore the words, "Faith over Fear," in gold lettering, a gift from her church family. Her neat handwriting filled page after page. Day 15, met with city planning. Initial resistance, but they're reviewing the permits. Reminder, trust God's timing, not man's schedule. The following weeks brought a parade of challenges. Contractors raised eyebrows at the project's connection to Marcus. Some refused outright, citing scheduling conflicts that Sophia knew meant something else entirely. The old-timers at the local diner whispered behind their coffee cups when she walked in. But Sophia persisted. Each morning she arrived at the lot, measuring tape in hand, vision clear in her mind. She could see it all, the welcoming entrance, the bright waiting rooms, the space where healing would happen. One particularly difficult afternoon, after another contractor declined the job, Sophia found herself in Pastor Green's office, fighting back tears of frustration. Sometimes I wonder if I'm fooling myself, she admitted. Maybe they're right. Maybe his name is too damaged. Pastor Green leaned forward, his kind eyes serious. Sophia, remember David? Everyone saw a shepherd boy. God saw a king. Keep your eyes on the vision he gave you. That Sunday, Sophia stood before the congregation, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I need your help, she said simply. Not just your prayers, though Lord knows we need those, but your hands, your time, your skills. To her amazement, hands began raising across the sanctuary. Mr. Jenkins, a retired contractor, Mrs. Patterson, who worked in the permit office, young couples, elderly craftsmen, teenagers looking for summer work. One by one, they stepped forward. The following Saturday, the lot hummed with activity. Volunteers cleared debris, marked foundation lines, and set up a makeshift project office in a borrowed trailer. Sophia moved from group to group, coordinating efforts, her clipboard never far from hand. My Harold would have loved this, Mrs. Wilson said as she handed out water bottles. He always said this town needed more healing and less judgment. The journal entries continued. Day 42. Foundation marking began today. Tommy from church brought his surveying equipment. God provides exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. Day 50. Permit approval finally came through. Mrs. Patterson helped expedite the process. Prayers answered. Day 67. Rain delayed the concrete pour, again. But we're not giving up. Levi always said patience was a form of faith. When the first concrete truck arrived, Sophia stood watching as grey slurry flowed into the carefully prepared forms. Each pour represented another step toward reality, another prayer answered, another piece of the dream taking shape. The summer heat beat down mercilessly, but work continued. Church members set up a rotation, bringing lunches for the volunteer crews. Children ran between the adults, carrying water bottles and running messages. Even some of the initial skeptics began stopping by, curiosity overcoming their reservations. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sophia walked the perimeter of the site alone. The foundation was complete now, a concrete footprint of promise. Construction materials lay neatly stacked, ready for the next day's work. She paused at the gate, her hand resting on the temporary chain-link fence. The evening breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and possibility. We're getting there, Levi, she whispered, her eyes tracing the outline of what would soon rise from this ground. And thank you, Marcus. Thank you for helping make this possible. Her gaze drifted to the horizon where the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The same sky that had witnessed so much pain in this community was now witnessing its healing. Sophia touched across again, feeling the familiar comfort of its presence. In her journal that night, she wrote, Day 75. Sometimes God's greatest works start with just a foundation, both in buildings and in hearts. Today I saw both taking shape. The concrete is set, but more importantly, I saw Mrs. Thompson, who lost her house in the foreclosure, working alongside Bobby Jenkins, whose father worked for Marcus's company. They were laughing together. Healing is happening, Lord, not just in the center we're building, but in the hearts of those building it. She closed the journal carefully, running her fingers over its worn cover. The words, faith over fear, caught the lamplight, glinting like a promise. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new permits to acquire, new skeptics to convince. But tonight, Sophia rested in the knowledge that God's work was already visible, not just in the concrete and steel rising from the ground, but in the changed hearts and mending relationships throughout Haven Oaks. The foundation was laid, both literally and figuratively. What would rise from it would be more than just a building. It would be a testament to the power of forgiveness, the strength of community, and the endless possibilities that bloom when faith overcomes fear. The autumn morning dawned crisp and clear, painting Haven Oaks in shades of gold and amber. Sophia stood at her bedroom window, watching the sun rise over the nearly completed Levi Carter Community Health Center. Her hand smoothed the simple navy dress she'd chosen for today's ceremony, fingers absently touching the silver, cross at her neck. "It's really happening," she whispered, her breath fogging the glass slightly. The past few months had been a whirlwind of activity. Construction crews working overtime, volunteers painting walls on weekends, local businesses donating furniture and supplies. Even those who'd initially opposed the project had slowly come around, won over by the community's transformation. Sophia's phone buzzed, a message from Margaret, Marcus's sister. "On my way. He would be so proud today." Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes as she replied with a simple heart emoji. The relationship she'd developed with Margaret over these months had been unexpected but precious. They'd spent many evenings together, sharing stories about both Levi and Marcus, finding healing in their shared grief and purpose. By 8 o'clock, Sophia was already at the center, supervising last-minute preparations. The maintenance crew swept the new sidewalks while volunteers arranged chairs on the front lawn. A simple podium stood ready, draped with burgundy cloth. Behind it, covered by a white sheet, waited the memorial plaque Sophia had commissioned. "Mrs. Carter?" Tommy, one of the teenage volunteers, approached with an armful of programs. "Where do you want these?" Sophia smiled, remembering how this same boy had once spray-painted angry messages on Marcus's development signs. Now he was one of their most dedicated helpers. "By the welcome table, please. And Tommy, thank you for everything." The boy ducked his head, smiling. "My grandma's going to be one of the first patients here. That makes it special, you know?" As the morning progressed, more people began arriving. Church members in their Sunday best, local officials in pressed suits, former Haven Oaks residents who'd lost homes but found new hope in this project. Sophia greeted each one personally, her heart swelling at the sight of former enemies now chatting like old friends. Mrs. Patterson from the permit office arrived with a massive bouquet of white roses. "For the reception table," she insisted, hugging Sophia tight. "Though they're not half as beautiful as what you've built here." By 10 o'clock, the crowd had swelled to over 200 people. Chairs were filled, with many standing along the edges of the property. The autumn breeze carried the scent of coffee from the refreshment table and the sweet fragrance of late-blooming flowers from the newly planted garden. Margaret arrived last, elegant in a grey suit that reminded Sophia painfully of her brother. The two women embraced without words, understanding in their shared tears. "I brought something," Margaret whispered, pressing a small box into Sophia's hands. Inside lay Marcus's reading glasses, the ones he'd worn during their scripture sessions. "They should be here too." Sophia placed them carefully on the podium, next to her worn Bible and a framed photo of Levi. 3 pieces of her journey, united at last. At precisely 10:30, Pastor Green stepped to the podium. The crowd fell silent, even the children stilling in their parents' laps. "We gather today," he began, his deep voice carrying across the lawn, "to celebrate not just a building, but a miracle of healing, not just of bodies, but of hearts and community." Sophia sat in the front row between Margaret and Mrs. Wilson, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The pastor's words washed over her as she gazed at the building before them. Its red brick walls and large windows seemed to glow in the morning light. The words Levi Carter Community Health Center stood proud above the entrance in dignified bronze letters. When it was her turn to speak, Sophia's legs felt wooden as she approached the podium. But as she faced the crowd, peace settled over her like a familiar blanket. 9 months ago, she began, her voice clear and strong. This was an empty lot full of broken dreams. But God specializes in restoration. He takes our brokenness and builds something beautiful. She shared stories of the construction, the volunteers who showed up day after day, the unexpected donations that arrived just when funds ran low, the former rivals who became friends over paint cans and lunch breaks. This center, she continued, represents more than healthcare. It represents redemption. It stands as proof that love is stronger than bitterness, that forgiveness has power to heal what hatred destroys. Sophia moved to the covered plaque, her fingers finding the cord. This memorial honors two men who shaped this dream in different ways, one who planted the seed and one who, in his final days, helped it grow. With gentle reverence, she pulled the cord. The white sheet fell away, revealing the bronze plaque. For Levi Carter, who dreamed of healing, and Marcus Halloway, who learned how. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Several people dabbed at their eyes. Margaret pressed a handkerchief to her face, shoulders shaking slightly. Sophia returned to the podium, lifting the ceremonial scissors. The red ribbon stretched across the entrance seemed to shimmer in the morning light. With God's grace, she declared, let healing begin. Just as she positioned the scissors, a movement caught everyone's attention. A white dove, brilliant against the blue sky, circled overhead. The crowd watched in amazed silence as it swooped lower, finally settling on the entrance railing. The bird cocked its head, regarding the gathered people with gentle eyes. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the autumn breeze seemed to hold its breath. Sophia felt warmth spread through her chest, a familiar sensation she'd experienced during her deepest prayers. In that moment, she knew with unshakable certainty that she wasn't alone. Levi's dream and Marcus's redemption had culminated in this moment, and somehow they were present to witness it. With tears flowing freely now, Sophia cut the ribbon. The dove remained perched on the railing as applause erupted, its presence a living symbol of the peace that had finally come to Haven Oaks. Margaret found her hand and squeezed it tight. "They're here," she whispered. "Both of them." Sophia nodded, unable to speak. The warmth in her chest expanded, filling her with joy and gratitude. As the crowd began moving toward the entrance for tours, the dove took flight, soaring once more against the perfect blue sky before disappearing into the golden morning light. The Levi Carter Community Health Center was open, not just as a medical facility, but as a testament to the healing power of forgiveness, the strength of community, and the endless possibilities that unfold when faith overcomes fear. The autumn weeks following the health center's opening brought a steady rhythm of healing and hope to Haven Oaks. Sunlight streamed through the large windows each morning, warming the red brick walls and welcoming patients into the bright, cheerful waiting room. Sophia moved through the corridors with quiet purpose, her footsteps echoing on the polished floors as she guided her team of young nurses. Her office, a modest space overlooking the garden, held 3 treasured photographs: Levi's smile on their wedding day, Marcus sitting in his wheelchair by the ocean, and the white dove from opening day, captured perfectly by a local photographer. "Miss Carter?" Jessica, one of the new nurses, poked her head in. "We have a full waiting room this morning." Sophia gathered her files, smoothing her navy blue blazer. "Then let's not keep them waiting." The morning unfolded like many others, checking vitals, reviewing charts, offering gentle words of encouragement. But Sophia knew each patient carried more than physical ailments. They brought their stories, their fears, their hopes. During the lunch hour, she found Tommy Martinez, age 8, crying in the hallway. His mother was receiving treatment for diabetes, a condition that had gone unmanaged when healthcare was out of reach. "Hey there," Sophia said softly, sitting beside him. Would you like to help me organize the children's reading corner? Tommy wiped his eyes, nodding. Together they arranged colorful books and stuffed animals, his worried frown slowly transforming into small smiles. My mum says this place is like magic, Tommy confided, hugging a plush elephant. She feels better already. Sophia squeezed his shoulder. Sometimes the best medicine is knowing people care. Later that afternoon, while reviewing patient files, Sophia noticed an elderly woman lingering in the lobby. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, her weathered hands clutching a worn handbag. Something about her seemed familiar. Can I help you? Sophia approached with a warm smile. The woman looked up, eyes glistening. I was at the opening ceremony, she said softly. I've been wanting to come speak with you, but it took me weeks to find the courage. Sophia gestured to nearby chairs. Please, sit with me. My name is Eleanor Whitman, the woman began, her voice trembling slightly. I lived in Haven Oaks for 40 years before the foreclosure. I lost everything, my home, my garden, my sense of belonging. Sophia's heart tightened, remembering her own loss. I cursed Marcus Halloway's name every night, Eleanor continued. The bitterness ate at me until I could hardly recognize myself. She paused, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. But when I heard about his change, his final act of redemption, something shifted inside me. Sophia listened intently as Eleanor described her journey from hatred to healing. Seeing this center, watching families receive care they couldn't afford before, it's helped me understand that forgiveness isn't just about the person who wronged you. It's about freeing your own heart. Eleanor reached for Sophia's hand. Thank you for showing us that even the deepest wounds can heal. They sat together for a while longer, sharing stories of the old neighborhood and hopes for its future. When Eleanor finally rose to leave, she hugged Sophia tightly. You've helped build more than a medical center here. You've built a bridge between past and future, between hurt and healing. That evening, after the last patient had gone and the staff had departed, Sophia walked through the quiet halls. She straightened waiting room magazines, adjusted framed photographs, and paused at the memorial plaque. Its words seemed to glow in the fading light. In her office, she opened the journal labeled Faith Over Fear, One Last Time. Its pages held every step of the journey, from bitter tears to answered prayers, from broken trust to restored hope. Sophia picked up her pen and began to write. Today I witnessed another miracle of grace, not the dramatic kind that parts seas or moves mountains, but the quiet kind that transforms hearts. Eleanor Whitman reminded me that redemption ripples outward, touching lives we may never see. Marcus's final act of giving back what he'd taken away continues to heal this community in ways I never imagined. As I write these words, I think of two men who shaped my path. Levi, whose love taught me to dream, and Marcus, whose transformation taught me to believe in second chances. Their stories have become part of Haven Oaks' story, woven into its foundation of hope and healing. Even the hardest hearts can be healed when touched by grace. This truth echoes through these halls every day, in every smile, every thank you, every moment of restored dignity. And in these echoes, I hear God's whisper, "Well done, faithful servant, now rest." Sophia closed the journal, running her fingers over its worn cover. The setting sun painted her office in soft amber light as she placed the book in her desk drawer. For a moment, she sat in peaceful silence, listening to the gentle hum of the building's heating system and distant traffic. With a contented sigh, she gathered her things and turned off her desk lamp. The darkness felt friendly now, nothing like the heavy shadows that had haunted her grieving years. She locked her office door, walked through the quiet building one last time, and stepped into the cool evening air. At home, Sophia changed into comfortable pajamas and settled into bed. Her bedside table held a stack of medical journals, her Bible, and a small photo of the health center's opening day. She reached for the lamp, pausing for a moment of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to the quiet room, to the memories of Levi and Marcus, to the God who had guided her through it all. The lamp clicked off, and for the first time in years, Sophia drifted into truly peaceful sleep, unburdened by grief or anger or fear. In the gentle darkness, she rested in the knowledge that grace had done its perfect work, not just in Marcus's life or in her own, but in countless hearts throughout Haven Oaks. The spring morning unfurled like a gentle whisper along the coastline. Dew sparkled on the grass, and the salt-laden breeze carried the promise of renewal. Sophia Carter walked slowly up the winding path that led to the private cemetery overlooking the Atlantic. Her steps were unhurried, measured, each one carrying the weight of memory and meaning. The cemetery sat on a peaceful bluff, sheltered by ancient oak trees whose branches swayed in the morning breeze. Their leaves cast dancing shadows across the carefully tended grounds. Here, among the whispers of the sea and sky, Marcus Halloway had found his final rest. Sophia clutched a single white rose in her hands, its petals still beaded with morning moisture. She'd chosen it carefully from her garden at the health center, the same garden where so many healing conversations now took place. The rose symbolized purity, new beginnings, and the kind of peace that comes only after storm clouds clear. As she approached Marcus's grave, her heart swelled with emotions she couldn't quite name. The headstone stood dignified against the backdrop of the endless ocean, its granite surface catching the early morning light. The inscription, chosen with care and consideration, read simply, "Marcus Halloway, once lost, now found." Sophia remembered the day they'd discussed faith, sitting on his veranda. Marcus had confessed his feelings of being lost, adrift in a sea of wealth that brought him no peace. "Sometimes," he'd told her, "being found is scarier than staying lost." Now those words, transformed into this epitaph, carried a deeper truth. Kneeling beside the headstone, Sophia laid the white rose with gentle reverence. The grass beneath her knees was soft and cool, still damp with morning dew. She reached out, her fingers tracing the carved letters of Marcus's name, remembering the man who'd transformed from her greatest enemy into an unexpected instrument of grace. "You thought no one could save you?" She spoke softly, her words carried on the morning breeze. But God sent two broken souls to save each other. The truth of those words settled deep in her heart. She thought about how God had used their shared brokenness, her grief over Levi, Marcus's spiritual emptiness, to create something beautiful. Their pain had become the foundation for healing, not just for themselves, but for an entire community. The rising tide pulled at the shoreline below, its rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. Sophia closed her eyes, listening to the waves' eternal conversation with the shore. She remembered countless evenings spent reading to Marcus as that same sound drifted through his window, how the ocean's presence had somehow made it easier for him to open up about his regrets and hopes. As she sat in quiet reflection, the clouds above began to shift and part. Sunlight broke through in golden shafts, transforming the grey morning into something magnificent. The light caught the surface of the water, turning the waves into liquid gold. It was as if heaven itself was painting a picture of redemption across the horizon. Sophia watched the natural display with tears in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of gratitude, of wonder at how God could weave such beauty from threads of loss and pain. The health center stood in the distance, its windows catching and reflecting the morning light like beacons of hope. From this vantage point, she could see the building that had become both Marcus's legacy and her own mission. The Levi Carter Community Health Center had grown beyond their initial dreams. What started as a simple clinic had blossomed into a full-service medical facility, offering care to anyone who walked through its doors. The waiting room walls displayed both Levi's and Marcus's photographs, two men who'd never met in life, but whose stories had intertwined to create something greater than themselves. Standing slowly, Sophia brushed the grass from her knees. Her smile shone through her tears as she took one last look at Marcus's resting place. The white rose lay perfectly positioned against the grey stone, a symbol of the peace he'd finally found. In the distance, church bells began to ring, their clear tones carrying across the morning air. The sound reminded Sophia of Sunday services, of Marcus's first tentative steps into her small church, of the day he'd finally understood that grace wasn't earned but freely given. The bells seemed to speak of that same grace now, persistent, beautiful, and always having the final word. The health center's windows continued to shine in the distance, catching the morning light like dozens of stars brought down to earth. Each gleaming pane represented a life touched, a person helped, a small piece of both Marcus's redemption and Levi's dream made real. The building stood as a testament to the truth that hope could rise from the ashes of loss, that healing could flow from the deepest wounds. As the church bells continued their song, Sophia turned and began walking back down the path. Her steps were lighter now, carrying the peace that comes from knowing that even the hardest stories can end in grace. Behind her, the ocean continued its eternal dance, the waves catching the golden light, while above, seabirds wheeled and called in the brightening sky. The morning had started grey and uncertain, but now the world seemed to glow with promise. It was, Sophia thought, rather like the journey she and Marcus had shared, beginning in darkness but ending in unexpected light. The church bells rang out their final notes, their music floating on the spring breeze, reminding all who could hear that grace, indeed, always has the final word. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.